Hi, everybody. Sean McCracken, news editor for Hotel News Now, here with STR's Jesper Palmqvist and Matthew Burke together in beautiful Singapore, which is a rare occasion, and I'm thankful that you guys are getting together just for my benefit. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we're good. Yeah, I mean, it turns out that the flights between Adelaide and Singapore still work. So yeah, we're happy to join you in the same little booth today here. How are
Oh,
you?
hmm
very nice. Great to see you, Sean.
It is our first two for one for our monthly Asia Pacific check-in, which I appreciate. So obviously, Jesper, at least stateside, the big news in the Asia Pacific region seems to all revolve around the Chinese economy. So I will throw it to you and ask, what do we make of Asia post Golden Week holiday?
It for sure does, and the question won't go away. All right, it is after all a big economy, and people care about inbound, outbound, and domestic for sure, and the general economy. So in the last few weeks, obviously we've seen not just the or in the months, not just the initial stimulus package, which was upgraded and enhanced overall for the real estate. I think it's to the tunes of $500 billion to make sure that those residentials gets completed. For sure, will have an impact. I mean, how it corresponds to our world and how hotels and travel, primarily domestically, there's obviously a delay because we had a great Golden Week, no doubt. People were traveling. They were going to places that we assumed they'd be going. A lot of those new and upcoming destinations and brands that made sense for them, like continuing the trend just in a bigger perspective across China. And I suppose it had a similar kind of effect as the domestic stock markets had, even if less extreme, when the
hmm
stimulus package came. Big boost and then kind of back down again
hmm
because it was, for all intents and purposes, back to normal quite quickly
Yeah,
once it ended with that extended period. So we're back down to the rate pressure and tightness in markets and that we saw in the last couple of months leading in. So the holiday helps, creates a boost, but it doesn't naturally lift up the entire country demand now.
yeah,
But
yes.
listen, the biggest question people always ask, like, well, are we bullish then about China for next year? And you can put that in two conversations very easily, without a bit of bothing you. You could, we know historically that China is one of the few countries that can turn around something real quickly.
Yes.
They have the power to influence spend
hmm
very quickly compared to country in its size, given its size as well, and the policy making that they do. So that means that even though some of the numbers are dire, but the Chinese economy does not collapse, right?
Yeah.
That's often a misconception by Western media, but it's true that domestic media and state media in China are definitely seeing, okay, we gotta get some move on here, but to reach the 5% or whatever they say. But that, those numbers, if they do, are big and good anyway, that other
Yeah.
people would like to have. So I think there's still a good chance that during 25, China sees tier one and tier four, from 1.5 to get going. But it is uncertain still when that would be.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, 5% GDP growth in the
Mm.
Western hemisphere is a much bigger number, I feel like, than we're used to. So, to put in context, like their growth targets are higher than maybe what we usually digest on this side of the world. It's
Yeah, and
interesting, though.
I think Matthew would love to see that down in his neighboring country.
Yeah, well, I think it's also about what percentage do you need that actually moves the dial in many countries
Yeah.
is that actually in raw numbers it's not that many that needs to change, which is always the flip of
That's true. And in China, we've had a strong single-digit growth for so many years, so it's like an engine.
hmm
But New Zealand, not so much.
yeah, I mean everyone's kind of getting back to three quarters recovered from an inbound perspective.
Yeah.
hmm
Uh, and it is critical that we do, many countries get back to kind of what they were because of how they traveled across seasons, and they weren't stuck in one particular period of time to favoring. But again, it's in raw numbers, it's not a significant volume of travelers to make a meaningful difference to that. And if you look at airline capacity, it's back.
Yeah.
So the supply side is there. It's now just about the encouragement of the demand and the investment that different tourism authorities are putting towards that attraction.
Do you have all the flights in and out of Australia now that you need to have a similar kind of demand for business?
Yeah, and also as well for many countries, particularly in the Pacific, the higher education draws the students, and then you then get the flow and effect where then the families will want to come and visit, and they'll extend their trips and do different things. So it's not one dimensional of a tour group, a couple traveling independently. There is a broad mix now. It's much more diversified than it ever has.
Is that helping your temporary labor again in Australia that you kind of
It's definitely eased. Yes, it's obviously created other kind of socioeconomic questions around. Australia is still managing inflation. It's still got one of the higher levels of inflation in the developed countries, in the OECD. So, but that's population growth is running much higher than the long-term average.
Oh, of course.
To take a step back real quick, just to put a bow on the China thing before we ship that off. I mean, obviously it's a big issue here because the next couple of weeks we have brand earnings, and all the international brands are going to be talking about China to explain why the RevPAR growth is down. At the same time, Hyatt's announcing a JV with China Resources Land, which is maybe kind of highlights that split of short-term versus long-term outlook on the prospects there in China. But to get back to what you're talking about, Matthew, growth prospects in Australia and New Zealand, obviously, economically, we're talking about an entirely different animal.
Yeah, so I think there's Australia, there's New Zealand, and then in New Zealand there's kind of two stories that are running. So I might just touch on New Zealand quickly first, in that if you look at a couple of destinations on the South Island in Christchurch and Queenstown, they're recovering reasonably well and continuing to come along. However, if you look at Auckland and Wellington, they're certainly having their struggles, particularly through the winter months we've just gone through.
It's north versus south.
It is north versus.
It's like the old show from the 80s.
And it's twofold, because one is demand. There was a new government last year, which is kind of not austerity, but they're reimagining the economy and what they want to be able to do. Equally, at the same time, interest rates were quite high to hammer down inflation. And that's obviously had an impact on consumer sentiment domestically, and also in terms of businesses as well and how they travel. So that's impacted Wellington, and then Auckland has the same elements, but it also has a rapid rise in supply that was all built for the forthcoming convention centre. And putting COVID aside, that international arrivals would continue to advance. And travelers from America are coming through in higher numbers now than they were in 2019. Australians are pretty much back as the sort of leading source markets, but they don't have all the different countries there. So it obviously, and they're catering for more growth than what has eventuated. We need to do more than what 2019 was to fill that. So that's sort of the New Zealand story. It is probably a tough time for it, and they're usually quite optimistic people, but there is a sense at a recent conference that there are some short-term challenges that they need to work through. From an Australian perspective, it's probably a little bit of a boring story in some respect, that things are continuing
sometimes
to
boring is good.
Yeah, but sometimes steady as you go is quite good. Obviously average rate growth has completely deteriorated by and large across the country. Occupancy is continuing to come up as demand is still growing. And there are some segments that are still continuing to show some good strength. Meetings are getting stronger. There's definitely a good event pipeline across the period of the last few months. And if we look at the forward data across the country, whether it's capital cities or regions, comparatively to same time last year, everything's kind of tracking in a very similar vein. So, nothing to write home about, but in terms of taking returns to the bank, then putting aside obviously some slightly elevated expenses that are coming through, still there. Things are in a pretty good space to operate in a very kind of steady, safe investment market.
As an American, I enjoy talking about Australia because it's so familiar. Like the story is like easy for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah,
it's very comparable.
Exactly the same. The only thing that we haven't seen that you have in the US is around the class performance. We haven't seen that same bifurcation at the lower end of the market. And that's probably the nature of a couple of different sort of types of demand that we would have in Australia relative to that exists in the US. But by and large, we're very similar in terms of the themes that you have there in the US.
So there's also a lot of drive-in stuff in Australia, so I think there's a lot of similarities with Australia.
Absolutely,
the drive-in.
And I think the other thing as well, just sort of heading north again, is to talk just very briefly on the Japan story. That across the summer months, average rate was growing double digits in many of those popular markets. Still achieving growth in more domestic orientated markets through the summer months. But interestingly, and something that we are starting to watch, is that ever so slightly, the average rate growth year over year is starting to slow. So the trend is coming back. In saying that, it's still double digits. And the exchange rate has been moving around quite a bit over the last 2 months, which does have a meaningful difference to what the three of us would pay if we travel to Japan. But I think things are still in
still very strong. Every developer, every investor still wants a hotel there, and I still plan to get one there. And
the long term is that supply is incredibly hard. At a conference beginning of September, I was up in Tokyo, and really it's about now for how do you start to extend the opportunities into some really popular spots that are outside of the major cities. And as more people become second trip, third trip, because it's such an easy connected country, unlike many to get to their regions, it is still it's very easy because of such an advanced train network.
Sure.
So just wanted to touch on that it's still a very positive story in Japan.
I mean, obviously, it had to cool down marginally at some point, right? Like you can't keep that going forever, but still good.
No.
So, in less favorable economic news, South Korea was reporting some of its growth numbers just today as we sit to record this, with GDP up just 0.1% for the third quarter. Obviously, this is pretty new numbers, but I just want to get your take on just the general outlook for South Korea, because I know that things have been kind of the growth story's not been quite as compelling there, I would say, right?
No, I mean, Korea, we keep talking about Korea as a good, strong market in 24, and the short story of it is because it had both domestic and inbound growth. And historically, when it acts like a yo-yo market, it's because the domestic was kind of trying to get there, and it's still a market that still talks Seoul and Jeju so much. Like East Coast markets are still so small, the cities are small, and even Busan comparatively, and Jeju and other markets, and Daegu are small. But it is interesting now that domestic brands, from mid-scale up to luxury, domestic brands have found a real good place. There's some strong quality product that is finding its place in that domestic growth, and it's spreading a little bit outside those markets. Obviously, logistically, there's a lot of new built roads and things that are helping to get around. And also, the international brands are starting to expand and get in resort and urban locations. So I think helped by Chinese mainly as the inbound. Now that is of course very precarious because Chinese can come and go as proven in the past with geopolitical things in Korea. So that is a bit of an unknown how long that holds up for, but they'll take it as long as they have it. So I think these economic numbers, what was it, petroleum and other things that were kind of down right now, it's from a tourism perspective, it was a great Q3 and looks good into Q4 for their overall travels in Korea. And also when you look at, when we talk to owners and investors and developers, Korea is spoken of much more now than it was a number of years ago. Maybe more than I've ever heard, actually. I think more people are asking, hey, let's talk about Korea.
Yeah, it's like if you can't get into Japan, it's got a lot of similar characteristics.
Yeah, people like it. And then they have to learn, about the chaebols and how the setup of the owners and the unions, of course, in Korea, which is a different scenario altogether.
Yeah, I was just looking at RevPAR's up 13.7% year to date, which is a combination of 5% in occupancy and 8% in rate. So
it's not bad.
Yeah.
So, Jesper, you spent the week with my boss, Steph Ricca, hanging out at HiCap conference. So what are your general takeaways, A, from hanging out with Steph, and B, the conference?
It was great. First of all, I can't believe it was Steph's first trip here. And as they say in Seinfeld, she got jiggy with it. She was a great supporter at our end of charity event, and a good music lover, which we in our impromptu band really appreciated. So thank you, Steph, for supporting some mediocre music. But it was great. Obviously, the contribution, she was able to talk to heads of Age World and Singapore Tourism Board and be there at the event. And now HiCap is, of course, a pan-Asia Pacific content event. But I think, what they succeeded in, I suppose, to their credit, was there was a good mix of people. Would you agree?
Yeah,
from all over Asia Pacific, right? We had a good mix of people, and Southeast Asia, and I think that's important. Maybe more important now, because the story is so diverse. We haven't. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen this extreme diversity and growth, and where people are in the directions they're heading, and which metric. Because again, but like we talked to already, these countries, and I think in Southeast Asia, what really stood out is when you talk to the developers that want to put new flags in ground. It is so competitive because you might have had a couple of chains of brands to go in a little bit different with free structure, etc. Now it feels like everyone is after the same clients at a lower rate. It feels hyper competitive to get more flags in the market,
which stems off what is the consistent speaking points is that it is the developing countries with very young population, longer term growth, like they just take the long term perspective. And a little bit to what you mentioned, Sean, about some of the earnings call comments is what is the short term and also what is the long term delivery path for them to sustain.
That's true. And the only way to grow really is then through expansion and getting more and finding new paths, which is relevant because this week is ITB Asia here, and Matthew and I attended an event. It was actually the Ascot Limited, from Capital Ascot, a large hotel group with many different brands, and they had a big splash and media thing yesterday as a 40th anniversary of their organization, first property 40 years ago. And they also announced, together with the tourism minister of Singapore, their latest joint venture partner in China. And this is interesting because so many companies, including most of the Western major hotel groups, have realized over time that they need the right kind of joint venture partner in China. And then they pick a couple of brands, and if done correctly, it takes off. Yeah. Takes off, like hundreds and hundreds of brands or hotels. So this was news yesterday coming out. So Ascot will work together with Jinjiang, and Jinjiang obviously already works with other Western companies, and they picked two brands.
Yeah, they picked an Australian one that started in Australia, Quest Apartment Hotels, which is a business book franchise model. Very, very attractive proposition in business parks and appealing to that corporate market. And then
the classic Tulip brand, the European brand, right? Coming from that. So Tulip and Quest, and I mean, obviously a lot of thought would have gone into do that, but it's going to be really interesting. Obviously hard to tell, but I know they were telling us the Quest model room, they built that in 22 days, and that is China. So they set things up pretty quickly. So next time you're in China, you might see a lot of those popping up. And I mean, the reason for doing this is, of course, that someone who knows a brand and its brand essence from outside and what makes it work and working together and tweaking it. But at the end of the day, your big, large Chinese groups are the ones that are now experts at exponential growth, right locations and how to manage or franchise or whatever model they want to use. So interesting to see how more of those follow in there. But in other news, Matthew and I were in Indonesia this week, and Indonesia's still booming. Rates, demand, and flights, and it's people forget it is a very, very large country, Indonesia.
Yeah,
flights take off all the time. We said it felt like US. We flew with an airline that we were heading up to Singapore, and we had a booking. And now, when we bought the flight 3 hours before we were going to board, it didn't say, but it was 9 hours delayed. But it didn't say.
Right.
So we get to the airport, we go like, oh, this is going to be a problem. So there's another flight back up to Singapore with the same airline leaving, in 20 minutes? So we go up to a desk, and the lady, after some checks and then taking some phones out, she writes with a piece of pen on a boarding card, and off we go.
There wasn't quite the standby list you would see.
No,
Yeah.
but we appreciate the flexibility.
Yeah.
I think Indonesia, we love it. And listen, on a serious note, Indonesia early this week, they have a new government in place, and the red and white new government on Prabowo, so leaving 10 years of Jokowi behind. But he spent, new president, 8 months of building a coalition government. And we can see it across all the important ministerial posts. And also there is a new tourism minister that impacts that. And she is from not tech industry, was she? No, finance. She's been, so I think there's great opportunity. I may get that wrong, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see with the new government. But it's stability. Yeah. Indonesia and political stability and a good transition.
They've got two things running. They've got continued growth, new product for the domestic market,
sure,
and also exploring new international destinations, but also the over tourism of Bali, and obviously some of the restrictions they're now starting to put in terms of moratorium on development in certain parts of Bali to try and get on top of the experience so that they don't ruin the golden egg, as they would say. So
that's right. A lot of Indians coming into Bali now, definitely growing from that people talk about. That's big. Yeah, massive. So always, Sean, things happening left, right, center.
So, as always, we will close with the hotel industry's premier footy podcast, and the real reason that Matthew is here.
I just had to come specifically for this.
All season long, Jesper and I have been talking up the glorious Sydney Swans. We get to the grand final and just get crushed, like in the most heartbreaking, just completely deflating fashion possible. Matthew, you were there, enjoying every moment.
I got the pleasure of being there with 100,050 something other people. It was a. Look, if you go to a grand final, it is some sight to see your own team win.
Which is to clarify to our listeners, Brisbane Lions.
Brisbane Lions were the victorious team, and we were the favourites at the start of the season. Had like 2 wins in 5 games, 3 wins in 8 games, and we won a whole bunch of games. And The
It was looking
coach
pretty.
Cook,
It was looking pretty dicey.
it was
for
pretty
a while.
dicey, and the coach is an excellent man manager and actually used a lot of Ted Lasso to motivate the troops. We weren't too good at shooting in front of goal, and he used the scene. I forget which episode it is, around where the striker starts missing. He's got the yips, and he kills the dog.
Yeah,
Anyway, they use that
yes.
just to make it a bit lighthearted. Anyway, they yeah, in terms of belief and perseverance, but yeah, an incredible moment for a hardened fan like myself to have the opportunity to be there and see it. And yeah, Sydney were probably the best team all year, but
Except for when it mattered.
yeah, except for when it mattered. And they've unfortunately done it 2 years in the last 3.
So,
Yes.
so it's quite,
So I'm not sure what you guys are talking about, because the only thing I care about right now, doesn't make
You've
sense
moved
at
on.
all.
You've
No,
moved on.
no, because listen, Sunday 2 p.m. in Ipswich, who's playing? Swans are playing Lions. In
Oh, the women's.
yeah, the women's AFL,
Yeah.
AFLW are
Yeah,
playing
don't
at Sunday
don't
2
say it
p.m.
in
in
that
Ipswich.
tone of voice.
Which Brisbane is also
And-
entertaining.
So Brisbane are reigning champions, and you got to tell you, because obviously women's AFL is just as good as men's. It's a cracking game, and the Swans are struggling this year. They're really far down the ladder, and they need an upset this weekend is what I'm hoping for. I think that's what we're talking. That's what I thought we were talking about. I mean, this,
You know what I will say? I will say specifically about the women's league. It's been a breath of fresh air for the H&N staffers who bought into this whole exercise in the last year. Specifically, Trevor Simpson, who picked at the end of last year, he picked the Kangaroos, the North Melbourne Kangaroos.
Okay,
And
Yeah.
Brian Roten picked the Adelaide Crows, and neither one had anything to write home about during the men's season. But both those teams looking much better in the women's league.
yeah, top of the ladder, Melbourne. Absolutely, North Melbourne. They're really good. So yeah, what a fantastic, what
I've just
a
seen it.
great win for Lions at the MCG for sure.
It's almost more rewarding that Americans are watching Australian rules.
Yeah.
Australian rules.
Listen, Isaac Henry's still youngish. What is he? He's still got some good years in him, and we finally have a good midfield. But it just goes to show how hard it is to win the thing. It's
Yeah.
so
It is.
hard. You can't. And that's why we
It was
love
the
it.
most competitive season
Footy.
in a long time.
Oi, oi, oi. It's so good. But I tell you, the most amazing thing, cue alert for bias alert. We walked around High Cap here and talking about, the best thing was, apart from people come up congratulating you for Lions and telling me that Swans lost, rubbing it in, it was how much people loved the new CoStar product.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. That was a live ad. Sorry, but it was amazing.
This is territory I wasn't expecting to veer into.
I know. You see, that's why it was so extraordinary. No, we like just this amazing news that people loving the new CoStar product.
Is that because they could see the daily performance?
I'm just
good grand final day.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm just trying to move this away from the footy.
I will end this by thanking you guys for taking the time. And I will say my last comment on our Swans crushing loss. I will say, as a diehard American football fan who has lived and breathed the Buffalo Bills since I was a very young child, I will say I have a great amount of experience of losing championships. This is something that I've done repeatedly, and I would rather lose by 60 than lose by a missed field goal at the end of the game. So I will take that. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and have a good day out
Thank you,
there in
Sean. Great to
Singapore.
be with you.
Thank you. See you later.
Hi, I'm Isaac Colazo, Vice President of Analytics at STR.
Hi, and I'm Jan Freitag, National Director for Hospitality Analytics for the CoStar Group. Tune in to our new show, Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast.
It's a podcast on the global hotel industry, its current trends, what we're thinking about, and where the industry's going.
And we like to have fun with the data too. Find us on hotelnewsnow.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe today.
This episode of the H&N podcast was recorded on October 23rd, 2024 by Sean McCracken and edited by Rachel Daub. Look for this and more at hotelnewsnow.com.